Told you I was getting something to drink. Okay, so here we go. Section 4, chapter 14, page 416. 416, okay? Alright. We talked about the Crusades, we talked about the church, we talked about medieval towns, we talked about the manor system, we talked about feudalism. And now we are the power of kings. Feudalism, because of the Crusades, partly, because these different groups, the Muslims and the Christians and the Jewish nations, they are all now starting to interact. They are all spreading customs and sharing goods and services and buying and purchasing and selling to one another. And they are all interacting with one another on a large scale in Europe. The whole idea of the manor system, feudalism, was starting to fall apart. The church was losing control, even though they tried to gain control. And on 417 it talks about nation building. Now I did tell you back at the beginning that before the Middle Ages there was the Roman Empire, then there was the Middle Ages, and then you start having the forming of actual nations or actual countries, even though they didn't have the specific boundaries that they have necessarily today. But nonetheless, they still were starting to form. On page 417, it talks about nation building. It talks very specifically about the fact that feudalism was starting to fall apart after the Crusades. One of those declines was because of the growth of trade in towns and kings who tried to bribe the townspeople. They said, oh, give me some cash and I'll make sure nobody comes in and attacks you and wipes you out. Well, they agreed to protect the towns, and then they made laws to help the towns grow rich so that they could get more money and so on and so forth. However, over time, the people started to realize that they didn't need the control of these particular kings because all they had to do was kind of bond together. On page 417, the decline of feudalism, the church was losing its power, the Crusades weakened these kings and these nobles, so the people in the towns kind of joined together and they realized they actually had a system in which they could start running things for themselves. On page 417, it does talk about over time kings became more and more powerful. What that means is you have several small towns, okay, and they join together. And then you have a group of kings or one king who then is kind of in charge of that particular group of towns. So when I say that the towns rose up and they actually bonded together, it did not mean that they had they got rid of all their kings completely. It just means that those smaller groups and manors, all right, they grew into larger groups and manors. But the whole idea of feudalism started falling apart because they were not tiny little pieces anymore. They were large plots of land, hundreds and hundreds of miles. And you can see that under Birth of Nations in this section. It talks about the fact that eventually they were all united under a single king. A nation is a community of people that share territory and a government. And this is when these smaller groups became combined into a larger area called a nation. On page 418, one of the first nations or first countries at this time was England. And on page 418, it talks a little bit about the English King William the Conqueror, who was originally, he was from Normandy, which is a section of France, and he came in and he kind of took over that area in England, what is now England. And in 1066, William the Conqueror came in and established himself as king, and he started to dominate the land and basically control what used to be a bunch of manors and feudal estates, but now it was a large piece of land and property. And as feudalism was crumbling, he kind of came in with an army and took over. On page 418, after William the Conqueror kind of unifies this area of England, you can see that King John comes along next. He is underneath changes in England, and he is not necessarily the nicest man in the world. He raises taxes, he jails people without a trial, he abuses his power, and the people are angry. Everybody say angry. So what do? I'll show you what they did. Knives, pitchforks, clubs, And ice cream scoopers. Shut up, cat. Alright, so, no ice cream scoopers. But they did rise up, and they got mad at John because he was raising taxes, he was doing things that they were not happy about. And they basically said, look, we need some help. And even King John was trying to abuse his power with the clergy at the church. He was taking land away from the church. And he had to have an army that basically would support him in this. He was starting to take land away from the nobles or the landowners that were producing all this wonderful wealth for him. And the people finally said, you know what, we've had it. We're going to rise up, we're going to revolt. And King John got nervous. And he said, whoa, I better start listening a little bit. So the people said, here's the deal. They got some people together, they got some nobles together, they got some landowners together, they got some clergy, the religious leaders. And they all got together, and on page 418, they presented John with a document called the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta, as you can see on page 418, is a vocabulary word. And it was a document that everybody signed, and basically it limited the power of the king. So he could not raise taxes without the group agreeing to it for good reason. He could not just jail somebody and take over land without the group agreeing and him having a good reason. And if he did, the people threatened to ultimately storm the castle and overthrow or attempts to overthrow the king. That's the last thing John wanted. On page 418, it also talks about the model parliament or the Great Council. That was the group that made the agreement with John. It eventually becomes Parliament, or rather the model parliament, which eventually becomes Parliament, which is the parliament that exists in England today, which is a group of their people, their citizens, their taxpayers, its representatives, and they exist to help run England in this very present age of 2013. On page 419, along comes this clash. And that clash is between England and France. It is called the 100 Years' War. It lasts from 1337 to 1453, which if you do the math, it's not a full 100 years. But here's the deal. Gotcha. Didn't I? You're like, oh yeah. Wait a second. That's over 100 years. Yes, it is. I want to see if you guys are paying attention. I know I got somebody out there, though. All right, so the bottom line is, if you do the simple math, it's a little over 100 years, and that's because of the fact that, you know, wars, it take a little while for people to withdraw and finally say, okay, that's it, we're not going to fight anymore. But it's a series of clashes. It's on page 419. You can see the causes of the war. On page 419 it says very specifically, the borders of England and France were not the ones we know today. So ultimately it was over this land clash. And you can see that on page 419, third paragraph down, in 1328 the French king died. King Edward III of England, whose mother had been a French princess, claimed to be king of France. Under feudal law, the French nobles did not agree. Determined to get his way, King Edward III invaded France and began the 100 Years' War. So he was actually related, and then he invaded. Ultimately, England and France wanted to control the English Channel, which is a body of water, and they were fighting over that. And they both wanted to control wealth and trade and all the usual things that everybody fights over nowadays. Chicken nuggets, which is wealth in your day and age, as well as the ice cream. Everybody fights over the ice cream. So, you know, if you kind of think of the ice cream and chicken nuggets as 100 Years' War, you got France, you got England, and you got some battles going on over the control of that supply. You know, you basically have the same thing. Along comes this young lady called Joan of Arc, and you can read on page 419 about Joan of Arc. She was extremely young. She was a peasant girl, but she was super highly intelligent. one king after another. They just keep fighting. England wins most of the battles. You look in your book, the French continued to fight, however. And in 1429, a peasant girl called Joan of Arc took charge of the French forces at the Battle of New Orleans. Well, not Orleans, New Orleans, the Battle of Orleans, which eventually, when they came to this country, became New Orleans, but that's where we get the city of New Orleans in our country today. And under Joan's command, the French army defeated the English at Orleans. That can all be found on page 419. However, she was taken prisoner, sadly. She was burned at the stake. Alive. So she died. She got killed, and a lot of the French consider her a martyr, which is a fancy way of saying a famous girl or guy who's killed for their religious or their political beliefs. Okay, page 420. There's not a ton there, so I want to kind of wrap up what's going on here for your chapter test. I think I would definitely read through that, but I think the most important thing to realize is that there are 18 to 20 questions already on the test that you know already. And those 18 to 20 questions are the 18 to 20 vocabulary words. Some are in blue, some are not. Some of them we talked about. Some are basic people, some are places, some are, things and ideas. But many of them are in the blue vocabulary key terms in this chapter, 18 to 20. As a matter of fact, there's 18 to 20 of those for the test. Also on the test, you will find probably there's going to be a section on some reading comprehension for section 4, but you will have, I actually have some notes for you guys that you'll get tomorrow, whatever it is. You'll get some notes on section 4 that'll help you organize it a little bit. And then there are a handful, there's probably around 45, about 40, I'm rounding, okay? So don't hold me to say, yo, I said it was going to be 45 and it was 47 on the test and it's no, don't, okay? I'm going to do the best I can. Just everybody calm down. Just calm down. There's no written, which is good. Everything will be about 2 points each, something like that. You're going to find vocabulary. You're going to find critical thinking. You're going to find the manner system, feudalism, power of the church. You're going to find multiple choice. You're going to find some fill in the blanks. And if you look at the section assessments at the end of each lesson, comprehension, critical thinking questions, I would go over those. I would definitely go over those. Those are often some of the multiple choice questions is kind of reorganized. All right. Know your people and your places. King John, Pope Urban, Crusades, Western Europe, Rome for Roman Catholic Church, Joan of Arc. Know those people. The Model Parliament, the Magna Carta. Excuse me. If I keep flipping through, I see a few other things. We're talking a little bit about the Turks, the Christians, the Muslims, the Jewish nation, all wanted that section of Jerusalem. We're talking about knights, vassals, kings, lords, towns, life in the towns, serfs, peasants, middle class, church organization, Gothic cathedrals, magnificent churches, and on, let's see, on page, if you really want to, on page 421, there's some key terms. There's also a chapter summary. I would read through that. Major points. Read that summary, chapter summary. They're bulleted, but they're there for you. Those are really good. On page 422, I would definitely do the comprehension and critical thinking. Remember, you don't need to know dates. If you see a date, it's the real date. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just saying, by the way, this date, blah, 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 blah. And if I make a mistake on that, I'll fix it. You know how I try to be fair, and I usually give you the points anyway, okay? All right, good luck to you. I will see you in class. I will see you again, chapter, I'm not sure if we're doing chapter 15. I got to take a, yes, we are doing chapter 15. So, Have a great day, evening. Don't forget about your blog, okay? Remember, you have to log on and you have to answer my questions, pros and cons this time of the Crusades. But next week, obviously, will be different. And then you have to answer and respond to other people. I will be checking that periodically every day or every other day to approve your comments as long as they are approvable, if that's even a word. Okay? All right. So, that's about it. Good luck to you. You'll do well. If you don't do well, then come see me and we'll figure it out. All right? Because I'm here to help you do the very best that you can. And just remember, in the long run, as long as you stay on top of the homework, the daily work, you take your notes, you do what you're supposed to do, tests, quizzes, they'll work themselves out. And if you have struggle with one, it's only one. All right? And it can't hurt you that much, ultimately. It can't, unless you develop a pattern, in which case then it gets ugly and we have, we have to sit down for long periods of time with parents and stuff, and who wants to do that? I know you don't want to do that, that's for sure. But I am here to help you, so if you need help, come in, ask your specific questions, make sure you understand, okay? All right, I will see you in class. Have a great day, evening, moment in time, whatever it happens to be, and good luck on Chapter 14. Bye-bye.